space and experience, as well as impacting risk and reward. They fundamentally understand and critically engage the value of design and the necessary thought relations between the highest aspirations and simplest requirements in interior design and architecture with the capital A and capital with the capital dollar sign. Maybe the most apt description of shop is holistic, risk-taking, and entrepreneurial, with a relentless focus on positioning the firm to engage the most interesting, important, and exciting projects possible. In short, Coren and partners are designers and have created shop to push design forward. From early work such as Dunescape or a small boutique interior from me and Rowe, to the more recent home of the Brooklyn Nets, New York's East River waterfront, or US Embassies, shop is certainly one of the most interesting and important firms of the last 20 years. I'm really pleased to welcome Coren Sharples.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me? Yes? Great. This is first of all, apologies in advance if I'm a little rusty. I think we're all a little rusty right now, and we should give ourselves a break. So this is the inaugural post-COVID lecture for me after not having done this in a couple of years. The last time I was actually anywhere pre-COVID was Austin, and I was here actually on a retreat with my entrepreneurs organization, and we came here in February of 2020. And we were sort of like, is this okay? It was really great. And then, of course, a couple of weeks later, the whole world changed. And so I'm very hopeful that this trip to Austin will sort of bookend that episode, and that we can, we can start, getting back to normal, or at least, a new normal. And I think that, in addition to sort of getting back to our freedoms, though, right, things that we took for granted before COVID, there's going to be not just a return to the freedoms of movement, but also to kind of a new freedom of identity. Cracks that were already there in our society, racial injustice, wealth disparity, climate change, were already there, and the fractures were there. COVID was the wedge that got driven into these cracks, with this pressure sort of splitting apart our society. And in the rebuilding, there will be opportunities to change. Opportunities to change workplace, housing, justice, criminal justice facilities, and the values of our society will be reflected in the way that we choose to rebuild, and you will all be a part of that. So, a lot of the work that I'm going to show today was, conceived and executed pre-COVID or partly during COVID, and we've really just begun to examine what will the post-COVID landscape look like as architects and designers. But I think that there are things that we were already starting to think about that will be reflected and will give us the opportunity to build on that. So I'm very excited about that. And this kind of goes to the heart of what the firm is all about. And Clay, thank you for kind of speaking to that range in the way that we at Shop think, because we really believe that there's these two poles, right? There's there's the thinking and the vision, and there's the making and the execution. And for me, you cannot have one without the other, right? You cannot have really robust visionary thinking without an understanding the kind of inputs of how these things get made on many, many different levels, from labor markets to to raw materials to economic forces. And when we do sort of iterate back and forth between these two poles, that really leads to very, very rich and robust outcomes. And many people know shop architects for sort of large, complex buildings, around the world. We also we gain a lot of our expertise and experience starting with interiors. And so from, when you're young and you're starting out, people don't come to you and say, build a gigantic, ground up building. They come to you with small projects. And so really, I personally sort of cut my teeth and gained a lot of experience working in smaller scale and interior projects. And so as the firm grew, and we did start doing our ground-up buildings, it was very important to me to also remain with that that hands-on human scale and not lose that kind of connection. And certainly, working with materials and, at any scale, whether it is, small-scale installations or large-scale facades, we're really always very concerned with using natural materials. We want to have tactility, we want to have scale, we want to understand where these materials come from, how they're fabricated, how we put them together in new and innovative ways. And much of my career has been spent also, understanding how we can use new technologies, in particular digital technologies, to both design and and fabricate and construct in better and smarter ways. And we're doing a lot right now with AI and AR to really it's not just to making the things, but how we communicate our ideas, how we can really get out of just fabrication and get into the construction realm and start working, trying to import some of our ideas into the construction site itself, and working with builders. And so we're doing a lot in this world right now, and partnering with a lot of the companies like Unity that are in this space. It's very exciting what we're able to do now. And this is actually a space in our office. We built a 360 AR space, and this particular clip that you're seeing is actually a live feed from a manufacturing facility that we have. We're getting into some prefabricated building technology, offsite modular, and or offsite manufacturing, I should say. And this is sort of the combination of being able to have a view into that space, having people in our office be able to physically manipulate elements of in this case this chassis going together, and being able to have clients and contractors and designers kind of be in this space together has been really incredible. And we actually built this pre-COVID, not thinking how even more important that would be to be able to kind of come together in this virtual reality space. But at the end of the day, what we build does get eventually built out of physical materials, and we're still very, very much connected to those hands-on roots. And we have a large facility in Bushwick in Brooklyn where we do a lot of prototyping. This isn't the manufacturing prototyping. It doesn't take the place of mock-ups that the contractors and fabricators make, but we get into this very early in the design process so that we can test for ourselves what things will really feel like. And very often we'll have materiality and lighting and different things going on that we're testing at scale before it even gets into the design documents. Very, very important. And at the end of the day, all of this is really to make great places for people, and make places where communities can gather and have investment in their social fabric, which is so important. And I think for me, projects never really come to life until I see them occupied and enjoyed, and it's such a great thrill when you've built something and you see people using it and loving it and just living their lives there. There's just absolutely nothing more important to me. And I thought this is where I usually show a few projects, and I try to show some things that have a sort of a link and a development of the way that we think about a particular subject or train of thought. But one of the things that's really out there right now is the future of work, right? And I thought I would show a few different workplace projects, and they're very, very different, but all really speak to ideas of connectivity, and I think right now there's so much question about where will we work, how will we work, and maybe the most important thing is what are we working for, right? Mission. And and having work that is aligned with purpose. And this is a tough one, right? Because we work for a living, we work for clients, and you can't always be aligned in every facet of mission with, maybe your clients, especially when you're working for very large, organizations and corporations that have the budgets to build the kind of projects that we do. But I think, for me, certainly mission and purpose is from, as a creative person, a lot of it is about, just finding joy in what we do, finding joy in creating beauty, finding joy in just the sort of the creative flow, right? And then certainly there's layers of purpose that we can add to that, whether we're working in the realm of, affordable housing or social justice. And so there's certainly aspects of that we try to bring into, everything that we do when we can. But I think workplace itself is very important to me. I think it's very important to shop as a whole, because we love to work and we spend a lot of our time at work, and we recognize that most people spend a lot of their time at work, and we want those workplaces to be more humane and joyful and sustainable. And so it's something that we've thought a lot about. And when we go back in time and we look at how people envision the future of work, we love these images from the 70s that are, these images of this sort of utopian future where there was a kind of a blending of technology and nature, right? And this sort of like blurring of boundaries between what is sort of real and what is fantasy. And if you look at the way that work is portrayed in movies, there's sort of one portrayal that is very machine-like and very very cold and sterile. There's another portrayal that we think is closer to the truth, that is, or what we think the truth should be, of work where it's more flexible, more humane, more close to nature. And this is pre-COVID, we were thinking about this, and now of course there's this layer of not just like where we work and what that kind of physical environment looks like, but like what we do at work. Because pre-pandemic there was certainly this, there was like kind of very clear boundaries of where we live and where we work, and maybe you work from home occasionally, or you could work from a remote place, but most the sort of bulk of work was being done in a structured workplace. And then of course the pandemic just overnight turned that on its head, and we brought all of those programs inside to our homes, right? And so we really learned new ways of working within a different kind of environment. And we think that post-pandemic we're not going to go back to the way that things were, because even when it becomes safe and healthy, we have learned to kind of hybridize our daily routines into new environments. And so I think what's really critical when we think about the design of the future of work is that that we're able to support multiple modes of work, from individual to collaborative, from deep and focused to the highly connected. And so I'm going to talk about a few different projects, starting with Uber headquarters in San Francisco. And this is a new ground-up building in Mission Bay, and this is built now, so we did this completely pre-pandemic. When we started working with Uber, they were explaining their mission to us, and they were all about connectivity, right? So they wanted this building to feel like when you were in the building, they wanted people to feel really connected, and then outside of the building, they wanted to project that message of connectivity and really celebrate it. And so we were sort of looking at their mapping, and we were sort of mapping a loop within these buildings where you could walk and be connected to every level of the building without sort of going in and taking an elevator where you feel disconnected from other zones of the building. And then we also wanted to really project that to the exterior and celebrate it. And this is, the building is completed. It's a all glass building. It was very important to them to have transparency, and so of course with that also came, a lot of environmental concerns of how do we make this building energy efficient and perform with all of this very transparent glass. And so we actually, we did a lot of analysis and working with Atelier 10 to analyze the facade of this building, and wound up with a strategy called mixed mode, where we would have a thermal envelope set back from the facade of the building, and that the actual facade of the building would be a naturally ventilated buffer zone. And so the idea is that you have this buffer zone that kind of takes away a lot of the heat load from the building and lets the air circulation really reduce the energy loads on the building. This was not a prescriptive design that was allowed by the building department. So we actually had to do a lot of performance modeling and go in and really argue this to the town planners of Mission Bay to be allowed to do a building like this. It was actually not, it didn't really meet code. So it was, no one had ever. I mean, it's not that it hasn't been done. It's not that we haven't done naturally ventilated buildings, especially in Europe, but it just wasn't the code in San Francisco. So it was, this was actually really quite novel for them. And here's some, more sort of, diagram of how this works with the airflow, and also, one of the strategies was using biophilia, putting natural green screens on the interior of that wall, and we even though we were doing a lot of work in digital modeling, so building physical hands-on models is super important to us, whether it's at the scale of sort of understanding how components come together, or literally full-scale modeling, such as we did for understanding how these, how the motorized bifold windows for this naturally ventilating facade would work. And then going into the mock-ups, so performance mock-ups and visual mock-ups are super important in what we do. So in this particular mock-up, this window was cycled open and shut thousands of times over several months for testing. And then we were also in this mock-up testing the patina, testing the materials and the patina on the metal. You can see that there's some different colors up there in that top band because we were seeing how they weathered over time. And you'll also see this is sort of a bunch of different pieces of the facade put together. You see this piece over to the right, where we had different types of frits on the building as well. So that white one is actually from the inside. It's very interesting. It's a white dotted frit. From the outside, it appears white. From the inside, looking out, the frit is black, and you can actually see through it. It's almost transparent. It's very, very cool. And then the other one is actually also a frit, but it's that ladder-like frit. And we were, you'll see in a few minutes some images I'll show of the interior where we're using wood. We're actually using wood slats on the interior. We wanted to also kind of have that appearance on the exterior of wood slats. So we're actually doing it through this frit, which was, I think, very successful. And let's see if we can get this one to play. This is supposed to be a animation, but I don't think it's going to run. Anyway, this opens and closes, but it's not running. And there it goes. I just had to try and advance it. So this is obviously like a time lapse, but the way that the building works is that this whole facade is connected to the building's BMS, the building management system, and there's sensors that are measuring the heat on the building, and so it will open and close, literally with clouds will pass over and the building facade will change. It's really kind of cool, and just another image of that building with some of the facade. Open. And you can see the different, the different frets on the building. And one of the things that was, like very important, as I was saying, was this idea of connectivity and having that visible on the street and throughout the building. And so right from, the sidewalk level outside the building, we have every place we could, we tried to create views up into the building and through the building to these different spaces. So from the sidewalk, you can actually look up into that, what we call the porch space. And then coming into the building, again, so where you see those wood slats, that's the thermal wall. So we really wanted to have this sort of duality between the interior and the exterior. And so when you're behind the thermal wall, you still get a lot of natural daylight, but you have privacy from the screening and the sort of warm glow from the wood. And then the reverse from the exterior, you get that like sort of glowing box behind the screen. That's where you can't really see people, but you can kind of sense that activity. And at every moment creating these views through. So this is then now up on that next level and view looking back down towards the sidewalk, and just in that space. And this was taken before the green wall got going, so it hadn't been installed yet. And again, the wood. These wood ladders that we call them, I think were very successful in screening that portion of the building. And of course, if you know our work, we love bridges. So bridges were a big part of the connectivity here, and very much celebrated. There's actually a cool thing here. So, we're in San Francisco, we're in like earthquake, central, and we've got these bridges, and we had to design for the lateral movement, right? And so there's where these bridges, on one side they're fixed, and on the other side they're designed to actually punch through into the building. There's actually like a little roller, and a whole bay can actually kind of poke through into the building. But of course, you've got a facade on there, and it's glass. So the last bay of both of these bridges, where it meets the tower portion, is they're connected. They have a breakaway fastening, but then there's a little bungee cord that holds it. We actually had to test this, and I was there and I saw them testing it. It was so cool. So if there's an earthquake and the bridge kind of goes in, this glass pops off, and then it gets caught by a bungee so it doesn't fall and kill anybody. So that was really awesome. And then I love also that you can walk across the tops of these bridges, go outside, and this is over what we call there's like a through cut that's landscaped, and this was also important to the city of Mission Bay, because I should say the district of Mission Bay, because I really wanted to have like more activity and sort of so in this little cut there's like nice gathering spaces, and there's some smaller scale retail and things to have more activity, because really on the street it's it's 4 lanes of traffic. You can't really hang out there. So we created this nice little oasis between the buildings. And then, continuing on that path brings you up to this landscaped, amphitheater on the roof of the building, which is great for the employees. And so I think we did a good job, with this in the end with the execution to celebrate connectivity, with between people and to the outdoors and the city. And so next I'm going to show a very, very different project, but it's also about celebrating connectivity, but just in a very different way. And so this is a project that we did for, it's the renovation and repositioning of a full block office building in Midtown Manhattan, right next door to Grand Central Station. And this building began its life in 1913 as the Biltmore Hotel, and it was built at the same time as Grand Central Station. It's actually connected below grade to the station. And in the 80s, it had a sort of unfortunate renovation where they stripped the entire building down to its steel. Literally, like all of the limestone, everything, interior and exterior, gone. They filled in that fourth side. You can see the original building was kind of a U shape. So they filled in the fourth side, reclad the building in this kind of polished red granite and black glass, and enclosed on the top with a skylight. So the one kind of redeeming feature of this building is that today it has a 30-story atrium in the middle of the building with that skylit, and that's kind of great. But otherwise, there's not much that's good about it. And after Bank of America left, Facebook was there briefly, and then one of the younger family members, was getting involved in managing the building for his family, and he started something called Grand Central Tech, and this was a tech. This is an incubator, a tech incubator, and they actually are really amazing. They give free rent for a year to selected tech startups. They give them a lot of access to business planning and VC and just a lot of support. And then their idea was that when they graduate, that they would take space in the building. And they've been going with this for a few years, and they have a lot of really successful graduates. And they started thinking about kind of growing this idea into, more than just transactional taking space, but really becoming part of a community and getting people to stay in the building for that sense of community and the support. Here's another image, some of the historic images of the building. Again, you can see how close it is to Grand Central. And then on the right, that was that's the interior at the podium level of the historic building. And this was called the Palm Court, and it was a really beloved, just grand lobby. Sadly, that was all taken down. And this is what the building looked like when we came along. You can see the main entrance on Madison Avenue was like dark and just completely uninviting. You had to actually go down steps to go into the building. So from grade, you went down. Often it was kind of like wet and it was dark and damp and completely uninviting. There was no handicapped accessible entrance in the building except for on sort of the far corner in the loading dock. So if you were in a wheelchair, you had to come in the loading dock on the opposite side of the building and go into an operator elevator, and they would take you up to the third floor, where you would then wheel around the building to get to the main elevators that took you into the tower. And you can see, the interiors are just really kind of very drab and sad and corporate. And and also there was this very strange sort of barnacle, this little tiered greenhouse sort of terrarium things, which were sort of separate spaces that had very little. Once you went in them, it was you were just in this really weird little terrarium. And so we were very challenged to figure out how to make this more sort of a place where young tech startups would actually want to come and stay. And in addition to the aesthetics, we also had to think about the programming, right? Because a lot of these companies, they wanted to be in a more downtown environment. They wanted to be where things were happening, and you had street life. And so we were asked to think about how we could reprogram this building. And this is 1 million square feet of office building, right? But we were really concentrating on the lower part, the amenities, and how do we make this into not just a visually and aesthetically dynamic place, but how do we make it actually have a lot of activity. And so, so in the end, we wound up hitting on, we did a lot of studies with the client, with their tenants, around what kind of amenities were they looking for. And we landed on a lot of, food and beverage, and as you would expect, food and beverage, cafes, retail, a wellness center, which is, the sort of the ubiquitous gym, but this is really more of a spa wellness center, and a real bar. They wanted a real, a bar that served the public, and my client said, I want a bar that feels like it's always been there, So that was great. And we also did, full floors of just ready-to-move-in office space. And this wasn't like WeWork. This was more like small, medium, large space that was just built out ready to move in, because they said, this is crazy, and just, they own this building. They're every time somebody moves in, they rip out everything that was there before and they build it all new, and it takes forever and it costs a lot of money, and all of that stuff that just went in gets ripped out, and this is crazy. Like, let's just build small, medium, large, and when you grow, you can just go to another space, right, in the same building. So that was, that was their sort of business model idea. And this was actually, and I'm actually going to go back for a second. So remember how you went down to go up in this building? So fixing this and making the entrances accessible, and also getting rid of those little terrariums, this was actually like a very big, this wasn't like just we're going to change some finishes, right? This was a major, major undertaking. And so we actually, for this project, this was a $200 million project, we upgraded all of the vertical transportation, the elevators, the escalators, then we did all the MEP, the fire safety, the data, right? So we did that for the whole 1 million square foot office building. And then we did gut renovation from the 8th floor down. And so, it seems very easy when you say, oh, let's just level out that sidewalk, let's just level out that entrance so you can come right in off the street. Well, that involved moving like a ton of steel, right? So you can see like we raised up that level when you come in off of Madison Avenue, and that in order to then not come into a teeny, really compressed space, we removed part of the floor so you come into this really grand double height space. New elevators, escalators bring you up to, plus stairwells, because we want people to walk, bring you up to the new, to the existing podium level on the 2nd floor. And you can see that there's like parts of Grand Central underneath this building. So just, even finding places to put elevators, like you couldn't put the elevator pit because there's like a ballroom below you, right? So there was, it was very, very challenging. And then you'll see up at where it says the perch up here, that was where those funny little terrariums were. So we like ripped all of that out and brought in new steel. And really the idea was like, okay, the beautiful old Beaux-Arts building is gone, but, so it's now it's a modern, it's a modernist building, but let's take it back to like clean, classic modern instead of this sort of weird 80s modern. And so a lot of that was just like around cleaning up the volumes. And here you can see like, again, like we had to strip this all down to its steel. And another big challenge of this was that the building, 1 million square feet of office, this was an occupied building. They weren't gonna like empty it out, make all their tenants leave. So we did the construction in 3 phases, concentrating on one entrance in each phase, and then keeping the building operational with the other 2 entrances, and having this huge scaffolding that, so we could all do the work safely, keeping the building open. So it was really just an amazing undertaking, and just like, I don't know, for me it was lots of fun. And this is the new grand lobby, where we really wanted to update it with a lot of like a really warm palette. So we were using wood, we're using metal with Barnes Patina, rich textures and colors. And again, you can see like sort of cleaning that up so that it kind of reads architecturally. And the floor, I don't know if you can see the floor pattern here, but this was, we knew, okay, you're going up on this atrium, every floor you walk around and you look down into the floor of the atrium. So we wanted to put a like really eye-popping pattern here, but also have like stones that were really interesting and had a lot of texture and warmth and contrast. So the floor was actually a really big deal and a lot of fun to work on. And when you start doing stonework at this kind of level, you're not only like you're going to, I went to Carrara, and you pick out the stones. We have 2 stones coming from Italy for this, and then one came from Vermont. The white one came from Vermont, the other 2 came from Italy, so we went to Italy, looked at the stone there, and then we come back, and the only place that they could do locally that had a lay-down area big enough to lay this floor down was in Canada. Like, I don't even know where it was because it wasn't near any commercial airport. Like, they actually had to fly us in a private jet, and this was in like February. We landed on black ice, and then they drove us like an hour to the facility, and we're like out in the middle of nowhere, but it's this huge, huge factory where they do a lot of granite there. But so they flew our stones in, and we did the laydown, and you actually had to do it. It was actually 2 separate days because it was even too big to do in one day. And then what was really neat is when, so I literally went, and, I had staff with me, we literally went stone by stone, and we did the blending, and it's really cool. They had this big gantry with like a suction cup, and that's how they lift the stones. So we would go around and we would tag them, and we would say, like, we want this one, you could tag which ones you wanted to go where, and they would pick them up and move them around, and on the second day they let me actually drive the lift, and it was kind of, you have to get used to it, because it kind of wants to swing around, you have to, it's sort of like learning to drive. It was really fun. Anyway, so you really have to do this. Like, there's just no substitute for this. And then at the end of each day of the laydown, they took a drone and they flew the drone up and they photographed the whole thing, and that became our submittal, right? So they did the drone footage and they sent it to us, and we signed off on that was the laydown. And then they literally number every single one, put them back in the crates, ship them to the job site. And, the facade as well. So this is we did, 4 sides of an interior atrium, 8 floors, from the 8th floor down. So it was really, we had a curtain wall in it. We didn't have to do the wind and water testing, because it didn't have to, it's inside, but it still had to, obviously, resist a lot of other loads. So this is a real curtain wall. We really wanted to have, like, again, that warm, that kind of sense of warmth. So it's got, we wanted this kind of patina on the spandrel panels, and then the column cladding. And some of these are fake. Like, they weren't real columns, but we wanted to create this. We wanted to actually create, rhythm and structure with the base spacing. So this was a really big job to get this, to really read as, as a kind of architectural structure. And this was all, this curtain wall was made in Italy, in a little town just outside of Venice. And I don't know if you guys have ever heard of this company called Pratt. They're one of the big 3 curtain wall manufacturers, and they actually did our Uber project. They do, like, pretty much, any project that you'll see with big facade is probably Pratt is involved in some way. So they had a factory here, and they had closed it. And so all the people who had worked for Pratt for, like, 40 years no longer had a job there. They just started their own factory. So this was called CSA Walls, and then, the glass we had in one of the floors where we have office space that comes right up to the window, we also wanted this ribbed glass. So there's only 2 companies in the world that do this kind of scale of this ribbed glass. One of them's in China, and that was cheaper, but the other was in Spain, which was closer to Italy, where the curtain wall was being made. So this glass came from Spain. And also we had, ultra high performance concrete. That's those the column cladding. That factory is there as well. That's my client rep sitting on the UHPC sample. He seems pretty happy. So and I should say, like, when we were there and when this picture was taken, I flew in overnight. So I was on a plane all night. They picked me up at the airport. They take me to their office. We spend, like, a couple of hours, like, drinking espresso and going through all the drawings. And then they take us out to lunch. And this is like the home of Prosecco. So, like, of course we're drinking Prosecco, and they're, like, plying us with, this. Anywhere you go in Italy, it doesn't matter. Factory town, they have the best food, right? So, and then after this, we go to the factory, and they say, like, oh, we need you to sign off on the mock-up and approve it. So that's my signature there, and my client's signature. So I'm like, okay, well, now I understand. And the metal in that spandrel panel, we had wanted brass, sort of like, we're like, oh yeah, we'll have brass. Well, of course we couldn't afford brass, so that's actually stainless steel. And the metal finishers are also in this little town, Di Castello, and so we went over to their factory, and we're working with them to to get the patina on the metal, and to say, like, okay, like, we want it to have a patina, and we want it to have some movement. We don't want it all completely flat one color, but we don't want it to also look like it's got spots. It shouldn't look like it has some kind of disease. So so a lot of working back and forth and saying, like, okay, we like this area and this color, and, like, so to create a control sample that we've agreed on. So we do a lot of this. And then, this is the interior of that double height space. And, from the beginning, our client was, they were saying that they wanted they wanted to have a lot of display and like a lot of objects and a lot of just like cool stuff, And I always get very nervous whenever we either make like a blank wall for art or we make a lot of shelving to put things on, because then it's, beyond your control, really, what happens there. And I can't tell you how many times I've done like big art wall. And then you come in, when the project is done, and they've got like 3 little black and white photos hanging on the wall. You're like, maybe I won't, next time we won't do that. And I've actually chickened out sometimes and put an architectural finish on a wall just because I didn't trust the client to actually do the art, So I was very nervous about this space and doing these like acres of, of display. And we have this on both sides of this double height lounge. But we had a former employee in our interior design group named Angela Finney, and she had left New York, a few years earlier, and she was living down in Marshall, North Carolina, and I knew she was doing, art and styling, and I just knew that she had like the right sensibility for this project and this client, so I brought her in. I was able to bring her in very early on and get her involved, so it really became this kind of like site-specific artwork. I grabbed some pictures from her Instagram posts during, just to kind of document like her process from the sort of concept ideas to the way that she mocked up the vignettes. She literally, she spent like a year scouring the country for, flea markets and vintage shops and like just buying all this stuff. And then she often like, even altered it. She painted things. She put her own pieces of art in, and she built a little mock-up of one of these cubbies. And then she created each vignette separately. She actually created it in her studio, photographed it, and then took all the pieces out, numbered them, wrapped them all up, crated them, and then the crates were shipped to New York. And in like one day, she's out there with the cherry picker and a couple of assistants and the building engineer who was responsible for, mounting things, because she didn't want to be responsible for something falling down and killing somebody. And that's Angela there, in her, with her I don't know, drill, doing the mounting. So it was, that was really great, to be able to kind of see this come alive, because the space wouldn't be the space without the contribution of her art. But what's paying for all of this is the rent, right, on the office space. So actually the first thing that we did was build out those small, medium, large offices, and we could not build them fast enough. Like literally, we had the ones that we had planned to do, and then they just kind of took that and replicated it up the building on even more floors, and then people started coming and saying, well, we want a full floor, can you do that? And it was great, because we had all the parts designed. We had the pantries designed, we had the conference rooms designed, we had the desking, it became this kit of parts that you could just put together in any configuration and build very quickly. And so that was, obviously this was pre-COVID, but they were like fully leased up on these spaces before. And then there were tenant-only amenities, which are this big cafeteria on the 7th floor we call the Commons, that has this great rooftop terrace that overlooks Grand Central Station. We really wanted that to have this fun bistro feel. And by the way, the client has their own hospitality group. It's an owner-operated building. They have their own hospitality group in the building. And we did a commissary kitchen on the 3rd floor that really services all of the food and beverage in the building, and they have an events, department. So any space in this building, from the lobby to these spaces to the bar, could be leased for event space. So they really think this wasn't just like a nice thing to give to the tenants. It's definitely designed to be monetized. And we actually went back and renovated Grand Central Tech, which was their original hub, which had been sort of a very down and dirty, build out when they first did it, had done it, 7 or 8 years earlier. And so after we got going in the building, Grand Central Tech was like, wait, what about us? We started this whole thing, and so we went in and we renovated this space as well. Can you believe that when Facebook had this space, they actually had drywall in front of this view? Can you believe? There was like a manager's office, it was drywall all the way down. It was a little door we went into. And this is like the first thing that you see when you walked into this space. It was crazy. So we ripped all of that out. We built some, typical sort of tech Spanish stepped kind of auditorium seating. And this has really become a bit at like the heart of the building because they do all the programming here. They have speakers come in. It's just really, really successful. And then in the main space, off of the lobby, we have a coffee shop. They call it Company Coffee. And this actually was constructed during COVID and just opened. And again, Angela did all of the artwork, styling here. And my favorite, Bergamo's, which is the bar. This is a 6,000 square foot bar. It's, it's accessible by its own entrance right opposite Grand Central Station. It's also, that little entrance where you see the swag curtain that comes off of the lobby during the day. So we opened it in we opened in December of 2019. And we closed in March of 2020. Very sadly, but they've just reopened. So, if you're in New York and go see Grand Central Station, which is absolute must-see if you're in New York, just come across the street and, have a coffee, check out the lounge, check out the lobby, and, for those of you who are drinking age, have a cocktail at Bergamo's. And onto something very different. So about when we were sort of midway through that project, we got a call from this company I'd never heard of called Atlassian. And they said, well, it actually wasn't even Atlassian, it was Trello. Trello called us and they said, we want to do this little, it was like a little 30,000 square foot space, corporate headquarters in this building in off of Union Square in New York. And I don't know if you guys know the area, but if you're in the design world in New York, you know this building. This is the home of ABC Carpet and Home. ABC Kitchen's on the ground floor, and I know I could never afford anything at ABC, but you would make the pilgrimage, right? And they had this incredible ground floor with just this dizzying array of cool stuff, right? And so what happened is that ABC had sold, they kept the kitchen on the lower floor, and then I think they kept the second floor, and then they sold off the rest of it as commercial condominium. The building was being renovated, and Trello had taken a full floor. Now, I knew Trello because it's this kind of task management software, and we used it in our wood shop. And so I thought, okay, it's a tiny little project, but I thought it's a neat company, and I love this building. Like, who wouldn't want to do work in this building, right? So we took the meeting, and I found out in my research that Trello had just been bought by Atlassian for like $465 million. I was like, okay, maybe we should take this a little more seriously, So anyway, so we took that job, and what was really neat about this now, looking back, is this is way pre-pandemic. Atlassian and Trello were already 67% remote. They had a philosophy that they should hire the best person for the job regardless of where you lived. And so they already had, this is from the project brief, they already had protocols around Zooming, and the kind of Zoom rooms, and what you were, if you had a meeting and one person on your team had to be remote, everybody went remote. Everybody had to get on their laptop. So it was, so that was kind of really novel for us. And what that also meant was that there was a very, very different space allocation than you would normally expect, right? Normally expect that little blue part of the pie that's desking. Normally that would be 2/3, right? So they were really much more concerned about creating meeting space and social space. And I realized, at one point they said to me, well, we really got to figure out how to get people to come to the office. And I was like, well, you just tell them they have to. It doesn't work that way here at Atlassian. So we're really trying to create incentives for people to come in. And most of, so there were kind of different components to this. There were the people who lived and worked in New York. They had a very small group that actually came into the office every day. And then there were people who lived and worked in New York, but more the programmers, they worked from home most of the time. And then they would choose to come to the office once in a while to have a team meeting or sometimes just to hang out, right? And then there were people who, because Atlassian is actually the largest software tech company in Australia, and they have offices all around the world, there were people who would just come through, passing through, and they would want to have like a kind of a place to to like go and work and meet people and just kind of like a touch base, right? So there was these kind of 3 different communities that we were designing for, and they gave us this brief. They spent a long time like preparing for this and probably spent a lot of money. They gave us this brief, and they had the guys who wrote the brief gave us a zoning concept study, and they gave us this concept, and I'm not going to say anything about this. But just one thing I will say is that they were showing a lot of desks at the perimeter, and if you've ever done work with programmers, you know that if you put the programmer's desk at the perimeter next to a window, the first thing they're going to do is like put up a giant piece of foam core blocking the window and like build a little hut around themselves, right? Because they don't like glare on their screen. So we were like, okay, this really doesn't work. So what we did is the floor plate is actually comprised of 2 buildings, right? One is a more interior building that's fairly, not a lot of light, and sort of like a quiet space, and then the other is that big open space with lots of light, and also it's facing Union Square Park, so it's it's like right there, and it's got like you just sense the activity outside, right? So what we decided is we put all the desking, where you see the blue over there, we'll just put all the heads down. All the heads down, quiet, focus work is going to be over there. And then we're going to, in the big open space, we're going to use the meeting rooms in the center to help us create zones and organize that space. So, we have you come in off the elevators. There's reception in the corner. That's where we put the lounging, and then there's the dining and the pantry against what was the wet wall. So it made sense to put it there. Then we kind of split the meeting room block to create this kind of main street. And the other thing that was really interesting about Atlassian is they're really into biophilia. They love plants. So if you go to their current headquarters in Sydney, it's just like covered with plants everywhere. And so this was actually part of our brief was plants. And so, I'm actually very analog when I get into sort of thinking about materiality and look and feel, and because I feel like it's kind of the opposite of like we do the diagrams and they're just they're very sort of like logical and it's great and they're very clear, but it doesn't give people a sense of feeling. What is this going to feel like? And remember that a lot of our clients, we're visual, right? So we use pictures to tell stories. Our clients are not, they don't have that visual language, right? They use words. So they'll use words like we want it to be comfortable, we want it to be inviting. But like, what does that mean? They might have a very different picture in their head of what comfortable or inviting means. So I think it's always really, really important to kind of like connect the words with the pictures and to make sure that you have the same image and that you communicate this to the client. And like we can do this through photorealistic rendering, but can you imagine you're at the start of a project, you haven't necessarily even modeled anything yet, right? You're not going to spend like thousands of hours, of very expensive hours, doing photorealistic renderings, and also you do that, and then they're kind of like, for a client that feels like, oh, like, okay, well, this is done. I'm not part of the process because you've already done it. It's finished, right? So what we like to do is like kind of I like to keep it more loose, right? I like to show precedence, and so this is a kind of combination of like images of the existing site with some, we threw in some greenhouse stuff to get an idea of this kind of, what that kind of, materiality would feel like, and bringing the plants in, and some of our favorite hospitality spaces, to kind of get that sense of like being inviting. And then, we kind of start to bring that into the 3D, and so for that meeting block, we had this idea, okay, it's in the middle, we still want it to have natural daylight, right, but we don't want it to be distracting with like a lot of views of all the activity around it. So, so we had this idea that we would create these greenhouse kind of feeling sort of blocks with this wall, and then we put planters all around it, and we put a banquette, a bench with a sort of a back that was up to kind of eye level, so you could have like activity and you could be sitting on the outside on these benches, but people inside couldn't see you. And if you were inside the meeting room looking out, you would have this kind of, the natural daylight, and you'd be surrounded by greenery. So we started calling this the green loop. And that's how it sort of laid out in the space. And then, and then constructed. And this was a very kind of fast, down and dirty project, not a huge budget. But what's really wonderful about doing these things is you get, when you do like a project like Uber, it's, it can be 10 years. We have projects that are 15 years or longer in the construction. You don't get that like immediate sort of gratification and feedback, right? So what's wonderful to me about doing these small scale, usually interior projects, is that you kind of like, you meet with the users, you talk about what you want, you do the design, you build it, and then you get to see it in action, and you get that feedback about like what's working, what's not working. And I think also I love it as a kind of a training ground for young designers to bring them in and get them to see a whole project from start to finish. Because so many people, they've come to shop and they've worked on a project for a couple of years in this sort of concept phase, and they never get to see it built. Then other people come in and they pick it up in the middle, and they take it a few more years down the road, and so I think these small scale projects are just wonderful to be able to take it from start to finish very quickly. And we finished this right before COVID, so they did open, but it wasn't like the sort of grand opening. It was more like a trickle of people coming in and using it, and they're still sort of soft opening as we all are nowadays. But we did everything here from specifying the furniture and the carpets, and we actually designed some of the casework and had it fabricated. So it was a really fun project. And it turned out to be a kind of extended job interview because, I never really knew why they'd call this in the first place. Like, you wouldn't think maybe Shop Architects is the company that you call to do your little interior. But it turned out that they already were putting together a short list for their corporate headquarters in Sydney for the competition. And all projects in Australia, all significant projects, are actually required to be awarded through competition, right? And most of them are international design competitions, so you'll team with a local architect and do the competition. So we were shortlisted to do this, and we won. And this is a really incredible project. It's located south of the Central Business District. It's going to be the anchor of a new tech precinct. It's right near the rails, as you can see. It's a very complicated site. And another incredible thing about Australia is their acknowledgement of place. Every single meeting that you have with with government entities starts literally Zoom meeting. They start with acknowledgement of place, and then they acknowledge the original peoples, and it's really powerful. So no matter what you're doing, you're always sort of have this grounding, and there's also a lot of requirements with the artwork and with telling the story of place through your building. And they were worked for many years before they even did the competition to develop the brief and to talk about what it meant to be an anchor tenant in this precinct. It's going to be a very important building. And then there's also, so it's a new tech precinct. It's next to a rail station, which is got a lot of complications in itself. And then this is the site. It's also on the site got a historic parcel shed, and it's this little teeny shed. I mean, it's only got like a corrugated tin roof, and you can see in the historic photo on the right. There's this building which is now a hotel. Was the post office, and mail came in on the train, and this was the sorting shed. So things came, mail and parcels came off the train. They went into the shed. They were sorted, and then they went into the post office. And what's in this building now is actually Youth Hostel of Australia. Has this shed, and they've got like little the residences out back, and they actually own the site. So one of the things that we have to do with this project is we actually have to take down this building. We have to restore it. And then we have to re-erect it. Like, so, okay, so we're building this giant tower on the site of this parcel shed, and we have to re-erect the shed, and that will actually be the, ground plane of our building. And also, to complicate things, the youth hostel has to go back in, so we're actually doing 5 stories of youth hostel in the base of the building. And then the client also had this incredibly ambitious environmental agenda, right? And they had spent 2 years working with engineers, environmental engineers, structural engineers, to put together a brief and what they called the reference scheme, which was aimed at a significant reduction in carbon, significant reduction in energy use, making the building naturally ventilated. Like, they handed this to us and said, like, we don't want you to figure this out. We want you to use this and work with our engineers, and you're going to do the architecture. But like, it was one of the most incredible, things I've ever had a client do for us. Usually we're fighting, with Uber, we had to go in and fight and say, like, you should do natural ventilation. We have to fight everyone. And here they're saying, no, we want you to do this. So that was incredible. And then, of course, again, by affiliate, this was like part of the brief that we had to incorporate greenery into the building as a strategy. So, that's a very, like, outside-in way of thinking about the building, right? And that's the way we sort of, as architects, would normally think about a building as, like, the container, right? And then then we think about interiors as filling the container. What's great about working, sort of doing those smaller and the interior projects and keeping your hand in that is that you can also think from the inside out, right? What's the user experience? And, so it was very important to me to think about, like, well, how do we preserve the qualities that we created that were so important in the New York headquarters, right? How do we have the intimate scale and the community that we created in New York and translate that into a tower that's going to have 3,000 employees in it, right? So we came up with this idea of having habitats, and we worked to kind of come up with the optimal kind of size of the habitat, and we wound up at 4 floors. With the ground floor being this kind of park where we would have lots of greenery and planting. It's also like required to be open for the natural ventilation. And then sort of having the meeting spaces and the gathering spaces wrapping around the perimeter of that, and then our heads down workspace. And here you can see, and you'll see that there's timber here, right? So this was part of the structural brief that we would have a hybrid structure. So every 5th floor is steel. We have concrete core. Every 5th floor is steel. We have a steel exoskeleton, and then within those 4, in that 4-story space, we have CLT, completely CLT structure. And it was really important for us to do this exoskeleton so that the CLT could be true CLT, right? There's no steel on the interior. I take that back. There's these mega columns, but there's only 2 of them. And then the core. So, the rest of it is completely open space. So we're going to build these kind of like 4-story little buildings of CLT every, and build like 5 of them up the building. And this was also really important for, this is also the fire protection strategy, right? So so you can build low-rise CLT within this high-rise steel building, which has, fire-protected steel. So, and then, there's also the working with Trend Solar and the local mechanical engineer to really refine how this, naturally ventilated facade works in all seasons. And of course, Mission Bay, San Francisco, and Sydney, Australia have the kind of climate that allows you to do this. We probably couldn't do this in Chicago, for instance. You may be able to do it here in Austin. So, but it's being able to take advantage of the warm climate and to be able to do a building like this was really great. And here's an image of what that will look like, seen from this sort of like new piazza that we're creating in front of the train station. And you can see in the section that little like funny parcel shed down at the bottom, and then the YHA section so you have the parcel shed, which will be the lobby, the main lobby coming into Atlassian, and also for the YHA we'll have a separate lobby, and then coming up they have the lower 5 floors for the youth hostel, and then above that it's Atlassian. And this was an early rendering of what that park space would feel like, on the mega floor. And I think here you can see, so Uber, we had vertical bifold operable windows for the ventilation. This will be more like a louver system. And in the original design, we also had PVs on each one of those shelves. That's being studied now to find out if there's, is that just sort of like paying lip service to energy efficiency? Is it really going to be worth doing? And then up at the top, this is one of my favorite parts of the building. This is what we call the crown, and this will actually be like open air space up at the top of the building. With a lot of the building amenities will be on this level as well. So, like I said, a lot of, these projects were all conceived pre-COVID, and certainly with the Atlassian headquarters, as we start to move into fitting out the tenant space, we're taking a lot of the things that we know into consideration. And I just want to leave you with sort of a project that is more in the future. This is just, a planning project that we're doing. I can't say where it is. It's under NDA. It's on the West Coast. And, just thinking through what the workplace of the future will look like, and how it will work, how it will be designed for, to really accommodate different kinds of work styles and connections, whether it's in large groups or individual heads down focus space, really accommodating multiple range of types of work and types of people. Thank you.